Okay, so let me know when you want me to go.
Fire away.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name's Kate Billing. I'm a humanist, a leadership specialist, and founder of New Zealand's 7th BCorp, which, if you don't know anything about, you'll find out more about when Rosie and I talk shortly. Today, in our conversation, we are talking about all things fully human, from my own personal experiences in recruitment and my own career, through what being a human-centered leadership is about, and actually just being a better human might be a good idea, eh?
All of the things. I love it. Thanks, Kate.
Right.
Excellent. Gosh, I love that. And that's exactly what we're going to cover. So, shall we
Yeah,
jump on into it?
sure thing.
That very first question, as always, what does recruitment and career mean to you?
This is the thing I love about English, right? We have
Yeah.
two words, which are kind of, if you double click on either of them, are enormous. And obviously there's some crossover there. Recruitment for me, when I reflect on that, I mean, that was, and I know this is something we're going to talk about a little bit later on, but was the beginning of an unexpected career path. More on that later, dear listeners. But recruitment for me is just this, it's such an important part of people's lives. And I think this is where it ties into career and recruitment done well or done badly, and how much of an impact that has on the lives and careers of individuals, and how much it has on the health, well-being and performance of organizations, from a culture and productivity perspective, right? In terms of how do we not just build a brand? I was one of the first people in a first employer brand people in New Zealand back in the day. How do we build a brand that authentically represents the experience of working for an organization? Because I think it's really easy to look at recruitment just as being a hiring process,
Yeah,
when it's much bigger than that now, with much more
absolutely.
specialization. But how do we help people understand what we're about as an organization, or on an organization's behalf as a recruiter? Create an experience that is a great part of someone's life and also gives them an idea of what it's going to be like to work for the organization.
Hmm.
Onboard them in a really fantastic way, because recruitment extends, I reckon, 6 months in. You never
Oh,
stop re-recruiting your own
absolutely.
people, I hope, ever. But at least 6 months in, as an organization. And then inside that, you are then shaping people's career paths. And I think my experience is that there is still quite a clear demarcation between recruitment and career in terms of the
Mm.
support that's provided to individuals. You have recruitment
Yeah, I
consultants, and
agree.
then you have career specialists. And I don't know that separation is necessarily that helpful.
Mm.
Uh, and that the same often is true inside an organization. You have the talent team who bring people in, you have HR and OD and L&D, and then you have hiring managers and individuals, and quite
Mm.
how those pieces of the puzzle all play together to really help it be a great experience and outcome, for everyone, is a tricky one. But yeah, it
Yeah.
means a lot to me, as I think it does to anybody who's been through it and has a job and has a career and hires people.
Exactly. I think you've hit the nail on the head there, because it's, as an individual, it's a journey. It's a journey
Yeah.
that you're going through and you're constantly evolving through. And I think that's, as we spoke earlier, part of the reason that I wanted to get into recruitment is because I'd done so much else around career mentorship. And it just made sense to me that there's a need to continuously be looking at both ends of that.
Yeah.
Now,
100%.
you have been involved in recruitment for some pretty big names like Minter Ellison Rudd Watts, Coca Cola, Chapman Tripp. How do you see more of a human centered approach evolving in recruitment?
Yeah. I mean, those were in-house roles, and I've done my time agency
Mm,
side as well. That's where I kind of first started.
yeah.
I think the more human approach in recruitment is evolving in the same ways that a more human approach to work and leadership is, in that the general context is uh, emphasizing our sort of common humanity and the good, bad, light, shadow, tricky bits about being
Yeah.
human. The blurriness on the edges. It used to be that you hired a person to do a job. Like even employment contracts have place of work, hours of work. I mean, how relevant is that anymore?
Yeah.
So, and the job description that you're hiring someone for is pretty much going to be out of date in 6 months, even if the
Mm.
job title hasn't changed. So I think
Mm.
there's so much about the world, the way the world is in terms of our expectations and ambitions. There is so much about the way the world of work is changing in terms of
Mm.
hybrid working, the nature of organizational design and structures changing, capability statements over job descriptions and task lists, the talent market. I think all of those things are meaning that getting down to the guts of what it is to be human, to have work as part of life, and what people are looking for. Even some of the basics of taking more of a human-centered design approach, which we've seen
Mm.
happening in customer experience and user experience and technology for a long time, but in recent years coming much more into employee experience and now recruitment experience. Like, what's the end
Mm-hmm.
to end, starting from a place of empathy and compassion for the people in the process, not just the candidate, but the recruiter, the hiring manager. How can we make this a really good experience at a human level? So I think there's a whole lot of stuff in the broader context that's changing, as well as some of the things around how we design experiences in organizations and for customers and for employees, which is now starting to get into recruitment. I mean, I think a lot of it is being changed by technology, but at the
Mm.
end of the day, I mean, I have lots of friends who still work in recruitment, and it's a lot of it's still the process. It's like,
Yes.
find me. I want something to fit in this sized box. Find me that person. I don't care how you do it. There's still a bit of that goes on both
Yeah.
sides of the equation.
Yeah.
So I think it's an evolving area, and one where there are a lot of different market forces at the moment
Mm.
at play about it. I don't know if you follow Molly Workman from Rush Digital on LinkedIn.
Yes.
Molly's wicked, right? She's awesome. Big shout out, Mol. She did a post late last week, might have been Friday, just
I
bemoaning
saw
the
it.
current
Yes.
situation, right? Well, it's had 581 this morning I looked it up,
Yeah.
581 reactions, 246 comments about the state of the market with skyrocketing salaries, people getting 10
Yes.
to
Yeah.
20% more, either in
And
offer
we've
or counter
seen up to
offer,
40% in terms of counter offers. It's,
which
yeah,
is nuts. How can businesses sustain that and
sustainable.
still
Yeah.
have the available funds to ensure that people get everything they want once they get on board? For
Yeah.
pressure as well with reduced weeks, so I want more
Mm-hmm.
money for less time, multiple
Mm-hmm.
offers, nobody applying, poor
Yeah.
old, and everything's headhunting now. And so I wonder how much of in that market is context, how much opportunity there is for the human experience when a lot of it's being driven by scarcity, or, now this might be a loaded word, but greed, to make the
Mm.
most of the opportunity. So the panic of, we have to pay this to get people, and you do, because everyone's just laddering up,
Yeah.
and then the entitlement slash what potential there is in the candidate market around, well, I've got that money, so I'm worth it. It's like, well, now you still
Mm.
have to deliver value to the organization because now you're costing us more. What are the unintentional and unforeseen impacts that the current market circumstances are going to have?
For the
And
next
they are
decade.
all,
Yeah.
yeah, and they are all going to be human, and
Yes.
there's going to be some suffering involved.
Yes.
So,
Yeah, it's incredibly interesting. And I think part of it, particularly in a country like New Zealand, there is networks, and people are 1 or 2 degrees of separation. And then for some of these roles, there are some very specific needs. So it is,
yeah. And
there are
if we
still
can't
some
get
great
people in from
candidates
offshore,
that don't. Yep.
Yeah, if we can't get people in from offshore, which we can't at the moment, which again is
Yes.
going to have to change,
Yes.
the insanity will continue.
Well, the roles are different. So some, there is some obviously with more remote and flexibility. There are still some that just require a little more in-house. So all of this is changing. I think it is such an interesting time. So on to you. How has your
Hmm.
career developed in both expected and unexpected ways, Kate?
Well, a couple of, I suppose, unexpected ones. I mean, I expected to be a doctor.
Right.
I had made that decision when I was 10,
Right.
and um, my dad and I were talking about this actually last Christmas. But yeah, and I was very, very clear that that's what I wanted. That's what I wanted to be, and I wanted to be a pathologist, which is about the study of disease. And took all, it was on the right career tracks, did all of the right things, but got to university, and by the time I was 19, didn't get an A- average at Otago in 1987, when it was the peak of the Scarfy days, and a whole lot of contributing factors for that, but I didn't get into med school. And so I had a bit of an identity crisis
Yeah.
at 19 of like, I've spent half my life being 100% focused on doing this, becoming
Mm.
this thing. And then I didn't, the competition for med school was outrageous, and I didn't get an A-
Mm.
average. And so I didn't get in. So the unexpected turn was, future doctor, etc., turns into university dropout who's having a mental breakdown at 19. So the unexpected turn was from doctor to receptionist.
Right.
Humbling as that was, and then awesome, learning the inside workings of a law firm and working my way up to being a legal exec, and then managing, getting into law firm administration and stuff.
Yeah.
So that was an unexpected turn. And then the next unexpected turn was coming back from being overseas for 4 years and moving to Auckland for the first time, and going into using a recruiter for the first time ever. Got all my jobs through, writing directly to people and, walking the streets with your CV and that kind of
Yes,
thing.
as we used to do. Yes.
Used to used to get a shoe allowance for as a legal exec back in the 80s, because you would do all your settlements on foot, walking between offices with files and
Wow.
checks, because nobody did internet. There was no internet,
Of
so
course.
there was no
Yeah, there wasn't.
internet
Yeah.
banking.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, and so I went and saw a couple of recruiters in Auckland. This was in 1996, and one of them sat me down and we had this conversation. It was for a practice management role. She said, "I think you'd be brilliant," and I was like, "Great, very excited. This
I
is
think so
awesome."
too.
She
Yes.
said, "Yeah," and she said, "I'm not going to put you forward for the job." And I had this moment of going, "I'm sorry, what?"
Okay.
She said, "Because I want you to come and work for me. I think you'd be a great recruiter. You've got a sales background, you understand professional services, you understand this, that, and the other thing, and I need a legal specialist. Do you want to come?" And it was 100% commission.
Yes.
I don't know if people are allowed to do that anymore.
Oh, I'm 100% commission.
Are you? Yeah, it was 100% commission, and I remember going home and going back to my friend's house where I was staying, and just he said, "How did it go?" And I said, I don't know quite what to say in response to that question. And going and standing in the bathroom and just looking myself in the mirror and going, what the am I going to do with this? And I slept on it overnight, because I always sleep on big decisions.
Mm.
And then I decided I'm in. So what had been, looking for a practice management role in a mid-sized firm here in Auckland, turned into the beginning of a career that's ended up with me where I am now, 25 years later, getting, 100% committed to the people side of it, which I'd always been committed to from a management perspective.
Mm.
Um, So yeah, that was like a completely left field out of the blue, but that's how I got into recruitment. And everything
I love
else
those
actually
stories.
from that point forward has been very deliberate.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm digging a little into that beginning of the identity crisis at 19 because we have graduates that are listening as well. How did you really cope with that? So going through and facing that realization, and then before becoming a receptionist, what do you think are key points that might help someone who is young and doesn't really have this this foresight
Yeah.
themselves right now?
I think the thing is that I didn't consciously do that. I remember my father saying to me when I finally got up the bottle to call him and say to him, "I can't do this. I can't
Yeah.
stay here." I had changed to an applied sciences degree,
Right.
and partway through the year, I had to do an off-faculty paper. So I hadn't got into med school. I was like, I don't know what else to do. I've just got to go to
Mm,
university. Had gone into applied science, transferred into applied sciences, and one of the things I'd had to do, because I was 100% science, basically science and maths and all the rest of it, was do something. They say you have to do something that's non-science. So I had done
right.
the history of 20th century design, because I thought, why not? And it changed my life. And it left me
Right.
even more discombobulated, because I was like, how did I not know about this? There are people in this course who are doing art history, and I always thought that was a nonny paper, but actually I love this. How did I not know about this? I got channeled
Right.
so early by myself and by my teachers and everything else, so early into a career centered qualification,
Mm,
that I hadn't considered any other options, and I didn't know how to. And so when I said to Dad,
mm.
I don't know what to do, because I am not committed to applied sciences now. I've had the chance to experience this.
Something
There's
else. Yeah.
something else. And he said, well, you can't do nothing. Our receptionist has
Agreed.
resigned. Our receptionist has resigned. You can come and live back at home and work for me. So I don't recommend that,
Yeah.
grads who are listening. But I think in many ways, I think the very old school approach to tertiary education of get a broad based liberal education, unless you're, and even if you're doing a technical degree or a science based degree, is
Mm.
have, that's why STEAM is more important than STEM. Having arts
Mm.
in the,
Yes. Yes.
in the mix is really important. So my advice is always to be interested, curious about, and learning about a wide range of topics, so that, and be more learn how to be, and this is something that only comes with a bit of time, and even some of us who've got more grey hair don't get this nailed, guys. So if you're younger than me, don't, you know don't feel the pressure. Just be
Take it on
mindful
board, but it may not be there yet.
to be flexible in your identity, who you
Yeah.
think you are, what you think your life is going to be like. Don't become too concrete about it all, because you
Mm.
have no idea who you could become. And I guess that's one of the big things for me, is that's, in lots of ways, that's the work I do now, which is, it's, being a pathologist is about the studying of disease, but what it
Yes.
actually means, if you look at the literally, is the study of suffering. And that is what a lot of my work is. And it's been about where people get stuck in their ideas of who they are, and what other
Mm-hmm.
people, who other people are, and the nature of relationships, or the nature of the world, or, people get stuck in those things. So I guess that's the, be open, be curious, don't get stuck in one area of study, one potential career track, one view of who you are and what you could be, because I won't say all things are possible, but there's a lot more possible
Yes.
than you might think.
I do. I share with mentees, um, don't just aspire to be who you should be. And that's really around that whole point of people that have made their mind up of, I should be this, I should be that, my family's pointing me in this direction, or it's where my ideas are. Um, it is definitely a wider scope than that. So I think that's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I got lost in the
advice?
long grass for like a good 10 years after that,
Mm,
um, and had the best of times and the worst of times in a whole lot
yeah.
of ways. And I really only feel like even in my 40s, I started to become more myself. But I have to say, there's something about being 50 plus now that is really liberating. And actually,
Additionally
I'm
liberating,
only
yes.
halfway through. I'm only halfway through my life.
Yeah.
So can't
Yeah.
imagine what I can do from here. So if you're
Well,
a grad and
speaking
you're
about
listening, you've got pots of time, guys.
pots of
Pots.
time, exactly. Speaking about different milestones through your life, in a recent post you shared it's been 13 years in business and 21 years in life, referring to the partnership you have with your husband, Paul.
Yes.
So, how did you both make that decision to work together? And what is it like working with your husband?
Paul had been on at me for a long time, actually, for us to do something together. And that
Right.
was originally about doing something in recruitment together.
Okay.
But by the time that he got into recruitment, because he'd been working in technology,
Yeah.
in sales and stuff with big brands like IBM. IBM was a big brand at those times, back in the 90s.
Hmm.
Um, I was in house and I was already moving on to other things in terms of culture and leadership and that sort of stuff. So the way it ultimately happened was the GFC, actually.
Right. Yep.
And he had been working for a startup. It was a really cool idea. It was a millennial job board at which,
Right.
at the
Yep.
time, 2009, it was great, and it was going to be just for youth focused work. And
Hmm.
but unfortunately, the timing really sucked because it was 2008,
Yeah.
and the wheels fell off it.
Mm.
And I remember him, sitting there. Just it was about November, end of October, 2008, and he was just like, I can't go back and work for someone else again.
Yeah.
I really want to do my own thing. And I was like, okay, well, we will make this work. And we spent the next 2 years working out what the hell we were doing.
Yeah.
Uh,
What is this thing?
what is this thing? Because the world was still on its
Yeah,
knees.
really. Yeah.
2 years of rolling restructures in New Zealand through 2009, 2010.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So luckily we had some time. I mean, that's a good thing. The
Mm.
GFC, start a business, starting a business in the GFC, starting a business now in
In COVID.
COVID.
Yeah.
Honestly, you can make it through
Well, I
this. You can make it
pivoted.
through. Yeah, you can make it through anything. So
Yes.
it was kind of circumstance. It was something we'd thought about and talked about for a long time. Then it was context. Then it was really just being sufficiently committed to making something work and thrashing. This is when you ask, how do we make it work? Thrashing really well is an important part of that. And I
Yeah.
think actually that it's an advantage that we're married and that we have a bigger commitment to each other than the business. That means we're not going to blow shit up in the business with our
Yeah.
thrashing because we
Yep.
have a bigger game to play, and that is a life
Yeah.
together, and we're committed to each other for the rest of our lives. That's so learning how to thrash well, and by thrash I mean have really healthy, productive, deeply uncomfortable conflict
Yes.
that is in service of being better together, finding the right way through particularly uncertain, ambiguous, and difficult times when there are lots of options or no
Hmm.
options.
Hmm.
I think that's one of the keys uh, to making it work. But we also, and some of the things I mentioned in the post, where we have really great, I think role clarity is key. What
Yes.
are your jobs,
Yeah.
both at work and at home?
Yeah.
um, and letting people do those jobs, and also being appreciative and recognizing the value people create in those jobs, whether it's doing the washing and making the beds, or doing a kick-ass job of getting great proposals out on time and
Mm.
nurturing client relationships. Whatever the things might be,
Yes.
really deeply appreciate them, because that's how you make a whole system of life and business work. Yeah. Just apart
Yeah.
from there's a whole lot of other stuff, but that's two of the main things I would say.
I love that. It is such an important piece to call out at this time while families are at home and
Hmm.
having to juggle that balance together around who is responsible for the children, the cleaning, the shopping, these roles that just can kind of magically happen in the day come to the fore now. So really important.
Yeah.
So tell us more about your work and mission at Blacksmith HQ.
So our work it has changed a bit over the years, but certainly where we find ourselves now, and the work that we as a team love doing, is around developing human-centered leadership, is what we would call it. So
Yes,
it's about
love
it's
that.
yeah, it's about a way of viewing leadership that puts the human at the center. So it's not necessarily it's not about the human-centered design methodology applied to
Hmm.
leadership necessarily, although aspects of that inform how we design and how we facilitate. It is about the human at the center, and so there are two parts to that. First is you have to, in the leadership development conversation, be talking about the human that is the leader.
Hmm.
This, and it's not a module on self-leadership at the beginning. It has to be a thread that runs through everything.
Right, yeah.
Who are you being and why?
Hmm.
And with what impact, and is that how you want to show up, and understanding more about that. So
Wow.
there's the human at the center, and then there are the human to human relationships, both
Hmm.
in terms of direct relationships and then more broadly about the organization as a human system. So
Hmm.
although the organization has an org chart, which is boxes and lines, and hierarchy, I mean, human beings are hierarchical creatures. If there wasn't a
Yes.
hierarchy, we'd make one. But it's also about understanding how important things like the building of social capital and the use of social capital. So, what happens between people
Hmm.
um, is as important as the people themselves. So, how you go about recognizing the nature of the psychological contracts that are in place and what happens to strengthen those or breach them, how you build trust, how you
Right.
operate in uncertainty and ambiguity when we know that human beings are being triggered left, right, and center, in terms of a
Mm.
threat response through that time, how we have conversations, because that's the way humans do stuff. We tell ourselves stories, we
Yes.
tell each other stories,
Give
you
each other
know.
proof. Yeah.
So there's a whole lot of piece around the nature of self-talk, storytelling internally between people, conversations, and in particular around human-centered change. What, how are human beings in what is now just the day to day of
Hmm.
change and certainty, and how that means we show up well or not. So there's a whole lot of stuff that we do in that space, and some of the stuff I particularly that I do within that remit is work with only 3 a year, but with leadership teams who want to become more deeply connected as people.
Mm.
Because I guess the thing that sits behind that for us is that we see, further to the stuff we were talking about earlier around the changing context in the world, uh, we see, because of some of the big trends in the world around massive population growth,
Yeah.
urban density, exponential technology, climate change, all of these things that are happening, that the
Yeah.
next, from now for the next 30 years is some of the most critical time in human history. And that the people we become, and we're at work most of the time that we're awake,
Yes. Exactly.
the people we're being at home, at work, and in community is critical to how well we navigate that time and how much suffering we create or avoid in our
Right.
workplaces and our families and communities. So our thing is, if you're going to develop your people, you may as well develop better humans at the same time as you're making better
Yes.
leaders, because
Yeah.
it costs the same money for an organization and yet has all of these incredible benefits for the families and communities people return to or are a part of when they get off the Zoom call. So
That ripple,
yeah, if you're
that
going to do
ripple is
leadership,
just
why not grow better humans at the same time?
absolutely.
Just yeah. So that's our mish.
Uh, Bloody good mish.
Thank you. We like
I'm
it.
all for that. Yeah. I think you're absolutely right. As humans, the ability to be connected, to have empathy, to have self-awareness, and turn up and take accountability, and continue to learn and be curious are elements that have certainly there's been more conversation around in the past decade, and it's really heartening to see how much more that is being embraced by larger organizations in the flow through. So I
Yeah.
just think the work you're
Well,
doing
I
is
mean,
phenomenal.
yeah, thank you. I think the thing is that there's been an intellectual academic approach for a long time that has kept things as
Yes,
the doingness of leadership, and some of that's very important, that you have great
yes,
strategies and that you have great change management practices and everything. It's very important. And yet, those things are worth nothing and will fail every time
yes,
if you don't understand how humans are going to be with them and through them.
yeah,
Because, the reasons those things fail to deliver, strategy and change in particular, are because of the human element of
mm.
what happens through the process of making them real in the world. So, yeah, ignore it at your peril is what I would say.
Absolutely. You mentioned this in your introduction as well. You're a certified B Corp founder, and these are businesses that meet the highest standards of verified social and environmental performance. So, incredibly important in these times. Public transparency, legal accountability, to balance profit with purpose.
Hmm.
Why is that important to you?
Uh, this is a big topic. All of these are really big conversations,
I know
Rosie.
I come with the big
Man,
questions.
we've only got so much. We've only got so much time. Um, it's a really interesting one. I think our perspective is that the way businesses operate has a material impact on the people who work in them, the people who are served
Hmm.
by them, the communities in which they are placed, the planet on which we sit. And so there is a
Mm.
level of responsibility that we have. One has to put some constraints around that responsibility, because we're not the government and we're not God and all the rest of it. But I think that the pure profit motive of businesses has driven some undesirable outcomes in terms of society, broader economic gains, particularly for workers
Mm.
over owners or shareholders, and for the planet. And so, being a B Corp, when we got into conscious capitalism years and years ago, which is a philosophy around this, which is a principle-led philosophy, but
Yeah.
not a how-to. And so, the looking for something that would provide above and beyond a triple bottom line reporting thing, which was about the only thing there was for a long time, we found B Lab and the B Lab assessment,
Hmm.
which you complete, and lucky companies who are prepared to shape themselves and be really conscious and deliberate will get above a certain mark. I think one of the latest ones in New Zealand is KiwiBank, who are a client of ours. So big shout out to KiwiBank. So it's important for us because what B Corp is, it's a globally recognised standard across a number of areas where you are asked some pretty, deep diving questions about how you structure and organize your business, from a governance level through to your environmental impact, through to community impact and engagement, customers, your team, your employed team, etc. And that
Mm.
you have to recertify it every 3 years now. So it's not a just pay your money, do your assessment, you
And
get a
then you're
tick,
done,
which you get to
right?
bung on the thing forever, right? You're held this. And what this does is give you a report back that helps you guide decision making about how you can be better and constantly improving your game. especially as things change. If your
Mm.
organizational structure changes, or your ownership structure changes, or the business you're in changes, and therefore your supply chain gets impacted, you're constantly being asked to have this as a frame of reference, so that it's not just about driving shareholder value and profit.
Yes.
It's about thinking more broadly and
Yeah.
holistically as a business. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Mm.
That's such a great framework to be able to check in with and understand the ramifications of wider business
Yeah, and it's not
decisions.
just loose and woolly. It's like this thing has
Yeah.
been going for over 20 years, and it's been road tested and refined, and now the community is growing like
Yes.
exponentially. New Zealand is we're part of the New Zealand and Australia group, and New Zealand, we are more than punching above our weight, guys.
Yay, as we
When it,
always do. Great to
yeah,
hear.
which is awesome. It's unsurprising New Zealand businesses are taking to it, and it's great to see some high profile and significant sized organizations getting on board.
Yeah, no, that is great. In your leadership development work that you do, what is a common theme that you help leaders with, and what high level advice could you share for them to take away as a bit of a tip today?
uh, the big thing is about, I reckon the big thing that we find is the human to human nature of work, and what
Yeah.
makes organizations work or not work.
Hmm.
Uh, and it is those principally relational dynamics is the way that we talk about it. And there are a whole lot of things that sit around that in terms of emotional intelligence and self-awareness and conversational competence and all the rest of it. But it is basically human to human relational dynamics. That's it. Because
That is,
that's it.
it's just, it's so important for so many reasons. So I agree.
Yeah. And even with the some of the senior work we do, senior level work in larger organizations, which often would be called enterprise leadership, but we kind of think about more as network leadership, which is about
Hmm.
that human system piece. By the time people are getting to that level, they know their job. They're hugely competent people.
Yes.
They've had
Yes.
lots of leadership development experience. What they are needing to do in new and different ways in very different difficult circumstances is manage themselves and other people in those relational exchanges about how to get things done faster, differently, etc. So that's the guts of, I think that's the core thing for most people is, who am I, who are you, how are we together in this context,
Mm.
and how do we consciously and deliberately be and do better. That's the guts of it. So in terms of any advice that I would have, I would hesitate to give advice. It's more an opportunity to notice more, which is the first
Mm.
piece of change, is like notice more about who you're being and how you're being with people.
Yes.
In particular, where you have drama, um, which is an time, energy, and attention drain. A lot of we could solve quite a
Right.
lot of productivity problems and efficiency problems, and just problems
You're right.
generally, if we short circuited a bunch of drama in our lives. So it's just notice more about that and ask yourself the question of what part you're playing in initiating or perpetuating it, and how you might stop. Because if
Mm.
you can diffuse that, you're solving a multitude of problems. And if you want to know how, then you can come do some work with
Then get
us.
in touch. Yeah, absolutely. Now, your sister recently created some sweatshirts with
Yes.
Je suis true, which
Je
is
suis
French for
true.
Je suis true,
Yeah,
which is French for I am too much. Why
correct.
is that messaging important to you? And how do you hope that people will embrace this motto?
Look, honestly, it started as a family thing. It started as it's been a family thing, and then it was a bit of a gags value thing. It became part of a
Yep.
character that my sister played during lockdown. She's an actor and artist, and she did this thing. She had this idea through lockdown, first lockdown in New Zealand in 2020, called Frenchy Friday, where they somewhat drag-inspired character called Frenchie Seams, who
Nice.
she lives on her own, and she was like just occupying herself, had a few drinks, started
Yes.
playing with things big, sort of Nigella Lawson, drag queen French cook who can't cook.
Perfect.
Yeah,
Perfect.
who said this je suis trop line at one point, I'm too much, and she was completely over the top. Where it sort of evolved from there is this idea that of women, largely, not exclusively, but I reckon 95% of the people who would feel that they are too much or have been told they are too much, and based on the engagement we've had around this idea, basically, yeah, there are some fabulous, beautiful, vulnerable men who've shown up in the conversation, but they are 5%. Women have been told as little girls and through all of their careers and lives by very well-meaning parents and friends and teachers and bosses and some not very well-meaning people, that they're too much in some way. For me, it was too smart, too strong, too ambitious, too intense, you know, too bright, but too bright. Don't shine so
Yeah.
brightly. You're showing other people up. It's a sort of thing. And we keep that then leads to those people, men or women, putting themselves into a little container and keeping themselves small and dulling down and limiting who they are and what they could be in the world and what they could do for fear of judgment and being told you're too much. Now, and partly this comes from this, I've got to be okay to be acceptable in the tribe, because belonging is a baseline human need for survival.
Yes.
And if I'm too much, then I might get chucked out of the tribe and then I die. And so Amanda gave me one of the sweatshirts for my birthday. She had it made for me. And I just said to her, I reckon this is a message that'll resonate with other people, because I know it's not just you and me, sis. And so I put a thing up. I was like, well, let's see what happens. And we put a post up on LinkedIn, I think in May, and just said, look, if you're keen, Amanda will make some more of them. And over the last few months, there's been some nice little energy around it. And we had a group call last week about it. And for me, I think it's just for people to appreciate that what people may have seen as too much in them may have been legitimately too much from that person in that context at that time. So there's a level of responsibility that we have to have in terms of, authenticity is contextual and relational.
Yes.
However, I reckon there's a good chance that a lot of the time it's been because it made that other person uncomfortable in some way, and that's not a good enough reason for you not being all of you. And my wondering about it for myself has always been, if I was more of that thing, or I allowed myself to be fully that part of myself, what would be different? What would happen? And how might that be better? How might that be a good thing? Because I really do think that normal is a facade that everybody buys into to keep the peace.
Yes.
When sometimes a little bit of feather ruffling and a little bit of being bright and loud
helps
and
progress.
Yeah, where the people who are a little bit rough around the edges, or things change because people are like that, and we need things to change. Things are changing. So how might you embracing your too muchness a little bit actually be good for the cause?
Yeah, I agree. I love that. I think it's so important, and a nice reminder for people that have been self-limiting potentially for a time, to go out and understand and stand in their potential. So it's a beautiful message.
Yeah.
I'm going to jump into another question now. What is one great personal hack that you have to get focused or improve your productivity when you're not feeling in the zone, as many have struggled with recently?
Yeah, I'm a big believer in taking a break for a start.
Right. Yep.
Get up Probably if you're struggling, it means you're spinning your wheels in the mud kind of thing. So I'm a believer in change of state. First thing is change of state.
Yeah.
Get up, get outside, move your body. First thing is listen to some music that you love that puts a smile on your face. If that, just you've got to change the emotional state, change the physical state, move yourself around, get more oxygen into your body and everything else. It can be like literally, it can just be 5 minutes, but 10 is good. Part of a recipe I came up with last year for how COVID-19 was an acronym for actually making the most of the situation. The 9 stood for 9-minute reset, which is what this is about. Right. So that's the first step. And then the second thing is I'm also a big fan of this idea. Brian Tracy wrote a book about it called Eat the Frog. So it's like, what is the ickiest thing that you have to do? Because the thing you've got the most resistance around is probably the thing you most need to do. Yes. So you're going to hate this one, guys, but that's what you have to start with. Clear everything else off your desk. Only have that thing as the thing to do. And then what I do is I use a binaural beats app on my phone, which is so I'm a big fan of biohacking and like how to work better with the body and the mind. And the binaural beats app is one that helps with what's called hemispheric synchronization. So it creates a dissonant wave. It puts one frequency in one ear, another frequency in the other ear, and between the two of them, it creates a dissonant wave in the brain, which replicates a particular brain wave associated with certain brain activity. And so you can choose one. I often use one that's about creativity. And so put that on with your headphones, noise cancelling headphones, set the time for 25 minutes and do not stop working on the thing for 25 minutes.
Just get in it. Yeah.
Just get in it. So it's 25 minutes is one way of doing it. There has been a bit of research that says 57 minutes, 50 minutes, say, on a focused task and then taking a 10 to 15 minute break is really good. But 25 minutes on and 5 minutes off. In the 5 minutes, go do something else, make a cup of tea, stand up, walk around, play a game, then back into it and just nail it. In a couple of hours using that, it's called the Pomodoro technique because of the tomato-shaped egg timer that the person who came up with the practice used. Pomodoro means tomato in Italian. So that's the thing. Have a break. Decide on the task you've got the most resistance about that's actually the most important. Set a timer, even if you don't put the headphones on, but I'm a big fan of headphones. Do 25 minutes, have a 5-minute break, do it again. So there you go. Yep. That's a top tip to make a start anyway.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. On to another tip.
Yeah.
Particularly probably more so for graduates and those early in their career. There's a lot of talk around value and value alignment of an organization and who you are. I get this question a lot from mentees is how do they really understand and find their own core values, especially as they feel they're growing and developing, and how do they walk in their authenticity? What can you share about that?
Yeah. Something I would encourage people to do if they're interested in it, just as a preface on this, is on the Blacksmith website, in the blog section, there are a couple of posts. One's a recorded interview and one's a follow-up Q&A with Michael Henderson, he's New Zealand's leading light on organisational values and culture. And so he has some really interesting insights to share about it, some of which are a bit surprising. So I encourage people to go. And look at that.
The link will be in the notes.
Yeah,
yes.
I encourage people to go and look at that first and foremost. I think there's a lot of talk about values, and one of the ways to understand what your values are, and they change through time. Personally, I think they change as you change. It's like your personality is not permanent, neither are your values. One of the ways to tell what your values are at the moment is to look at the results you have in your life in terms of the people, the experiences and the things you have around you, because your results are your commitment made real in the world. And values are really things you're committed to, right? So look at the nature of your friendships, your relationships, your health, your family, your career or your study results, if you're looking back at university, because that's a good indicator of what your values have been, what has mattered to you, even if we call it that, lose the V
Yeah.
word and say, what matters to me? That's a pretty good indication of what has mattered to you thus far. I also don't think people spend enough time thinking about who they want to become. If you're always thinking about who you've been and where you're at right now, that's not enough.
Yeah.
So it's thinking about,
Agree.
who do I want to become over the next 3 years? What are the things that that person will have created? Who will they be? And therefore, what are the things that matter to that person that
Yes.
will guide me now? The thing about organizational values is a lot of them, and Michael talks about this. He's like, there's 4 or 5, but to be honest, if you change one or remove them, it doesn't make that much difference. And they're all pretty much the same, just worded in different ways.
Yeah,
So
right.
if you're looking at them, I would say what feels right for you, as well as what kind of sounds right and logically makes sense.
Yep.
If you're talking with an organization, ask them about, particularly, don't just ask them what they are or just look on their website, but ask them about what's most challenging about living into some of them. Pick one that's meaningful to you or looks like it sounds good on paper, but what's it really like? And ask them, what's the biggest challenge about living into that?
Yeah.
How have they come unstuck? You when you're interviewing, you can ask tough questions too, team.
Yes, please do.
Yeah, you can ask tough questions too. Often what I prefer to think of is, rather than values necessarily, is I think of guiding principles. So what are the things that are kind of guiding me in my decision making and where I spend my time, energy, attention, money in my life at the moment, based on who I want to be and what I want to create? So for me, well-being has taken a big priority.
Right.
So that arguably you could say health is a value now, if you wanted to look at it
Yes.
in the one word value
Right.
statement things, health and well-being. But what that is actually for me as a guide rail is about staying fit to play the long game. That's actually the guiding principle. Stay fit to play the long game, because that's really meaningful to me, because I want to live to 100 plus. I
Yeah.
want to work for as much of that time as I can because I love what I'm doing and I feel like it's really important. And so it's not just, I want to be the best at exercising and have
Yeah.
a beach body.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah. Yeah.
actually, I want to be fit for life and for everything that I want to do over the next 50 years. So
Which is a
that means
completely different statement.
so
Yeah.
it's a very different statement, right? So I encourage people to think about things more deeply than just single word statements, because like we talked about at the beginning, recruitment, career, 2 words that have a lot underneath them. I mean, Exxon had integrity as one of their values, and look what happened. I mean, so
Great point.
yeah, and
Yes.
it's just make them your own. Have
Mm.
things that matter to you, and then unless there's something wildly conflicting in an organization's values, I think it's possible to overcook the importance of them.
Yeah.
Just,
Yeah.
are they good
No, I
people and do
agree.
they treat people decently, and are you going to have the things that you want in terms of your life and work experience? Cool, go there.
Yeah. I agree so much. We're nearly at the end of our time, so I'm just going to jump to the last couple of questions.
Sure thing.
First, what does being whole, human, imperfect, and real mean to you, Kate?
uh, uh, it means being able to see and allow the shadow parts of ourselves,
Yes.
to sit with. I'm a big fan of Stoic philosophy, and so the concept of memento mori, and meditating on our mortality and the fact that we don't live forever,
Yeah.
that we're aware of one life, I think is really important to this. Being deeply curious about what it is to be human, both generally in terms of how this beautiful
Operate.
thing works and how it works between these beings, you know, and how you work specifically.
Mm.
This I think integral actually means is about being
Yes.
whole and wholeness. And I think there is if people are fortunate, there's a place we get to where we realize we have an opportunity to become whole again, and that we have contained or lost or forgotten parts of ourselves along the way of getting to the place where we are in life. And this real, if you think about it, I mean, getting real with yourself first
Mm.
and foremost about what that actually you're on the wrong side of a whole lot of hard work when it comes to the second half
Yeah.
of the journey, if you like, of making peace with those imperfections, which happens as a necessity of aging, finding your way. I think of it as finding your way back to wholeness. That you
Hmm.
had it, you've just got to remember, not that it's something you necessarily need to create.
Oh my gosh, yes. What you shared, what you pick up, what you shared, what you pick up.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, wonderful. And last of all, is there anything else you'd like to share or last words to leave us with?
Um, yeah, I think the last thing that I would leave everyone with is a statement that underpins everything I do in my work and also in my life, and that is, don't let who you're being get in the way of who you could become. Take responsibility for who you are and how you're being in the world and what that version of you is creating. And if you think, you know what, it's good, but man, I think I can live a bigger, brighter life of greater impact, then just decide that that's what you would like to do and do the work to become that person. And because there are lots of people out there who will support you, there are
Mm.
lots of people equally in your life right now who might like you to stay just the way you are. Um, don't be afraid. Don't let fear get in the way of being all you can be and doing all you can in the world. The world needs all of you.
Oh, I love that possibility for everybody that you've left us with, Kate. Thank you so much.
You're most
It's
welcome.
absolutely fantastic.
Thanks, Rosie.